Let's call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mrs. Brumbaugh.
Here.
Mr. Kress.
Here.
Mr. Diaz.
Here.
Mrs. Gil Parsons.
Here.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Here. All right. 2, hearing of the public. How to address the Board of Education. To speak to items on the agenda. Hearing of the public is the time provided for public participation during board meetings. Board members also welcome public input outside of board meetings. The presiding officer of the board will recognize anyone wishing to speak to an item on the agenda. How to be recognized and what to do when recognized. When it is your turn to address the board, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized by the presiding officer. 2, state your name and address. 3, address board members as a group. Guidelines for public input. 1, the Board of Education members may ask clarifying questions. 2, the presiding officer may use his or her discretion regarding recognizing speakers more than once on the same subject. 3, individual remarks shall not exceed 3 minutes unless the presiding officer grants additional time. The presiding officer may rule repetitive statements out of order. All statements shall be directed to the presiding officer. No person may address or question board members individually. Who would like to speak?
Okay, Katie Waddell. I prepared a statement. It's pretty much the same statement as last meeting. I prepared a statement with a few concerns and questions for tonight's meeting. These concerns and questions are the same questions that I asked at the monthly BO meeting in November, and I have never received any follow-up from the school administration. These questions and concerns have also been addressed or asked at prior BOE meetings, and I'm seeking clarification regarding these issues and topics. 1, what is your plan to update policy 3213? I spoke about this issue and my concerns at the last BOE meeting. This is a policy that Carrie McGill referenced and directed me to after I submitted my statement at the BOE meeting in August of 2024. Regarding my concerns about how coaches were communicating with the student athletes via text messaging and not on school-approved communication platforms. During the BOE meeting in November, I reported to the school administration that my child had received a text message from my coach after the AD had sent out communication by email to the coaches stating that communications between coaches and student athletes needed to be on a platform such as the Team Snap app. I questioned where the breakdown in communication occurred for this to happen again, and I questioned if there were updates and modifications planned for policy 3213 to reflect the changes that had been recommended and implemented by the AD. Do you have any updates or any follow-up available? Have you considered starting a mentoring program for newer coaches to be mentored by more experienced coaches? When will the policy be updated? Last was updated in 2011. 2, what is or where can I find the policy regarding how often the superintendent is expected to receive a performance evaluation? I have requested all performance evaluations for Brad Ritchie, and I've received 3. He received an evaluation 2019, 2022, and just recently received a performance evaluation 2024. The most recent evaluation was dated weeks after the BOE renewed his contract for 5 more years, starting in the summer of 2025. How does the BOE renew a contract with a 5-year term prior to a recent evaluation being completed? Is there a policy? Can you refer me to which policy that the BOE utilizes? And have you considered modifying the policy to require performance evaluations to be submitted annually? This would help the district hold the superintendent accountable and would encourage the BOE to have meetings annually where new goals are set and old goals are reviewed to see if they were successfully completed and achieved. 3, have there been any discussions regarding potentially adopting a policy where spouses of employees who are permitted to receive insurance coverage through their employer would be charged a surcharge if they decided to stay on their spouse's plan? Have you considered a spousal exclusion option? Have you investigated if these options could potentially be a way to save on the insurance costs that the district is responsible for? 4, is there a way to make the monthly disbursement summary more user-friendly for the community by either color-coding the information to the specific fund that is being utilized to pay the specific expense or charge, or could you separate the expenses and charges into separate columns that are categorized by the specific fund that is being utilized to pay for the specific expense or charge? As referenced by a few BOE members in the Brad Ritchie's performance evaluation from 2024, a few of you believe that the community is not educated or the community is lacking understanding regarding the school financial information. Why can't we make the reports easier to understand for the community? Many in this community want to understand the information and they want to be involved in finding innovative ways to reduce waste and increase efficiency. I still have yet to receive any follow-up from any of you all. These are the same questions I asked at the last meeting. I would appreciate if somebody would follow up with me.
The offer stands to set up a meeting.
I've had meetings with people. I mean, I've spoken with Mr. Kress in the parking lot for a while after a financial meeting. I really do think that, number one, I would appreciate something in writing, and then I think other people in the community would appreciate something in writing, because I think that nails down what your policies are and how you feel about things. We can have verbal discussions in private all the time, but it really needs to be in writing, so there's a paper trail.
Okay. Would anyone else like to speak?
I'm Suzanne Ryerson, 3610 Ditmer Road in Laura. So I put out another survey because I was just curious about what people were thinking as far as the obstacles to just, I said reallocate, but according to what you guys discussed last Monday, it looks like you would have to do a 0.75, a decrease to 0.75 like you did last spring, and then add another 0.5 and just put it to operating fund. Like, that's what I would recommend, which is essentially the same amount of money. A little bit different, but almost the same when you look at the numbers, which you can see on the on my website, what the projections are, and I'm using that number that I checked with Mrs. McGill in the November meeting to make sure that I was looking at the correct amount of earned income tax that's going to the operating fund. So that's the number I'm using as the basis for all of those projections. So I guess I would like to know why that's not on the table.
So we talked about it some again. The only way to legally do it was how we did it last spring, and universally was poorly received. I mean, I think we heard about it for 9 months afterwards. So we couldn't do a replacement. And then the ballot language could not show our resolution. And we use, we're not, as you mentioned before, we're not attorneys or specialists in this. We consult with lawyers, and we have to believe them, since that's what they do. And we weren't legally able to do it a different way. And I don't think it was so poorly received. I don't think anything where we can't have the ballot language actually say it is worth trying.
And just to clarify, the last time it was a 1% new tax going to operating funds and a subtraction of 0.5 from the PI fund for a net increase of 0.5, or bringing the total income tax to 1.75.
Right. I'm
Not
just saying,
0.75, what you stated previously. I just wanted to clarify what exactly was done last time.
my point was you were willing to go down to 0.75.
The caveat was,
For the
though,
permanent
with having the
improvement.
1% going into operating,
Right.
there's more flexibility coming in and out of the operating fund than the PI fund. So in a shortfall year, if we had big replacements, we could possibly legally move money over to the PI fund to cover it.
So
That was
if
the difference.
taxpayers continue to vote no on an increase, at what point would you consider doing that? And how much do we pay for Dinsmore and Scholl or whoever to draft? Do they draft the language that goes on the
Yeah,
ballot?
It gets ran up the flagpole.
And then
all the way
Well,
to
the
also-
attorneys
state.
draft the ballot language, and they,
I mean, I can look,
Yeah.
but I just am curious how much we're paying for that to place it on the ballot, when if we could get another 1.2 million or more in the operating fund, I guess it would have to be 2026, but,
It would
why
fully
wouldn't we
phase
go
in
for
in
that?
2027.
Pardon?
It would fully phase, I believe, in 2027,
Okay.
not at this point.
So, yeah, I guess for me, I just feel like that would be a sure thing, so why would we not? Maybe it's not a sure thing, but would be closer. People would be paying, and then if I think people feel like there's something else going on that we're not aware of, like a field house or another building, and that's why we need to keep the PI.
I'm not sure
You
why
know.
you think it's a sure thing. I mean, because the ballot language is specific. You
Mhm.
have to do it a certain way. We can't, the Board of Elections determines how we put issues on the ballot, whether it be an income tax or a levy. And so that was done in the previous, and everybody said, oh, it's too confusing, too confusing. We don't understand it. Because we don't understand it, we're not going to vote for it. And I see, I foresee that to happen again if we try to adjust that and try to, I mean, we've communicated, the school's hands are tied. We can't go out and campaign for anything. So
Right.
that there are, you know, we can try to educate people in newsletters and whatnot, but we can't say, go out and vote because this does this, this does this, this does this. So our hands are tied. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff going around about a field house or whatnot. That is a dream. It's, nothing's gonna happen with that field house unless, or more specifically, other structures or to free up space at this school. It's not going to happen unless we pass a operations levy. And if we were to reduce the PI money significantly, that's not an option. So if we do go down that route, it will be discussed. We're not
Right.
hiding anything.
Well, you were willing to go down that route because you put it on the spring ballot. So you were willing to
That was
decrease
not-
it to
that was not-
92% of 0.75, and then that extra percent was going to operating, right? So that's my point. Like, you already were willing to decrease to that level. So that's what I was using as the basis for calculations. And in November, I thought someone admitted that you could reallocate or maybe do it this way and do it similar to
I
spring.
actually asked clarification after that meeting, and I think I misspoke in the way I spoke at the meeting. We can't, we can only decrease it. We can't reallocate it.
Yeah.
We clarified with our legal in this last week and a half.
So you couldn't do the same thing that you did last spring and just make
could
it
do
an
it
additional
exactly as we did.
0.5% instead of an additional 1%?
Oh,
So that it
and
stays
ask for less
1.25? Huh?
Just asking. So we could do a resolution.
That's what I'm asking. Could we
could
keep
do a
it the same?
resolution to decrease, and we could ask for, we could ask for a tiny property tax. I think it,
I just think
You know, like-
if the goal is at some point, or the dream, whatever, to have a field house or whatever, like I would have loved to have had a theater, for my kids. Like I think that would have been awesome. But if that's the goal, it's a lot easier to get people to rally behind that, I think. And especially if we get through this difficult economic period, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, that,
I just think it would be, get people to vote yes for something that's not an increase, but it will give more money to operating and take some from PI, which we're already willing to do last spring. And then maybe they'll vote yes to a PI levy, where you could kind of replenish that, this is just
Yeah.
from
No
people
plans
that
for a
I'm
PI
talking
levy,
to,
though.
from what I'm hearing. I'm just trying to present another view on the situation.
There's two caveats. You have the operating fund and the PI fund. The operating fund, we're trying to at least get out to a 5-year forecast that we file with the state in the black. And if we get too far down on splitting that, we don't get there. We also then starve the PI fund, where if we just go back 2 years and you do the 45% that you've presented, you don't have enough money to cover the bond payments. So then we run into another issue with the creditors, which I was on the phone with today about
Yeah.
the surplus needed. So if we
Well, how
had,
would you run out of money? Because it would be the same,
we would be running negative
almost
in
the
the
same
red.
situation as decreasing it to the 0.75 and then
Why-
92% of that.
Why don't we talk about this more at the meeting on Thursday?
Right, I mean, and it's a
So
question.
we can move on.
Yeah, it's a question I proposed. I really wanted to get some calculations to
Because you
see
wouldn't
how
have the
that would affect
surplus.
the 5-year
With the
forecast.
1%, again, we had the surplus coming into the operating funds where it gave us wiggle room on the PI side.
Right.
If you skinny that down to where there is no surplus in the operating, you're still running a deficit, then you have no wiggle room in the PI fund. That's the difference. And if you just go back a couple years and you look at what we brought in on the income tax, it's 800,000 less than it was last fiscal year.
Right.
So if you have any pullback in the economy, which there's plenty of people saying it's coming, inflation roared its head again last month. If they have to flip and raise interest rates, economy, we could see the income, there's no wiggle room.
Right, and
anywhere
we're
for the
going to get
district.
less tax too if people can't get their kids to school. So I think that's something to consider too.
I mean, we're still
just where
collecting
we
that
made the
tax,
cuts.
just going into the PI fund. It's not like we're losing it. It's just going to the bucket where we need it in the other bucket. So,
Right, yeah, and we can talk more later. I would love to see those projections with those numbers, because I think it could be helpful. But anyway, yep, I'm good.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? All right, we're gonna move on. 4, Treasurer's Report. A, approval of the Board of Education. Oh, sorry. 3, Superintendent Report.
I'm not going to do much talking, so it's okay. We asked Mr. Blackwelder, Ralph Blackwelder from Enrollment Management Services to attend this evening and provide a short presentation about benefits management that his firm can provide Milton-Union schools. They are a partner of the EPC. They've been around, well, I'll let him tell his story, but Mr. Blackwelder, thanks for being here this evening.
Sure. We brought some notes for the board members. Pretty simple. I'll just speak to everyone else.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Happy to be here with you all for a few minutes, and Brad, thanks for inviting me. Basically, Enrollment Management Services is a healthcare service organization that identifies an issue in employer-sponsored healthcare today. And just in a few minutes, just listening to some of the remarks, recognize there's lots of financial pressures the school's facing. And that's not unusual. That's happening across the nation, and many employers are dealing with a lot of financial pressures, as are families, on healthcare. And just this morning, there was an article that came out from some of the largest insurance companies that talk about financial pressures and what companies are doing. And there's forecasts just showing that healthcare pressure continues to build. And so Enrollment Management Services has a niche way of working to manage healthcare costs in a more effective way for the families that take the health insurance and also for the district. And so this was born kind of out of my own family experience, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it. But basically what Enrollment Management Services does, we've been in business since 2004, and we have about 100 different employers that we do this work for. And so starting out in the healthcare industry, I was originally trained as an insurance agent or a broker. But in 2004, I shifted to doing just education. And what put me on that path was I have children with cystic fibrosis. And so when I was down at Children's Hospital receiving care, I found myself kind of lacking with the right financial resources. And thankfully, there was some really good people that helped me. Well, coincidentally, I was already an insurance agent. And as I was receiving help, one thing happened where a service person down at the hospital said, you need to go down to the Social Security office and apply for your daughter. Now you're going to get declined, but bring that letter to me. And I thought, why would I want to go do that? I don't want to stand in line to get declined. And my little girl was just 7 at the time. But I did it. And after I was declined from Social Security at the federal level, then the social worker helped me to apply for something called a level 1 medical waiver for my daughter. And she was involved with some complicated care. But it really got me thinking that here I was already trained as an insurance agent, and I knew a lot, and I was already licensed, and I've been helping families. But there was things that my own family was eligible for that I wasn't aware of. They weren't on the test to be an insurance agent. They weren't in the continuing education. And I started to realize that a lot of times we learn through shared experiences. I started a company back then called Enrollment Management Services, and it was based on the idea that as I would come alongside employers, if we could understand the stories of the individual families, we might be able to identify alternate ways that people can access healthcare like I did for my daughter, and make healthcare work better for families, and also take the edge off of the employer plan. So fast forward today, we've had more than 24 different districts. We have more than 30,000 employees that we help do this. And our benchmarks are that we bend the financial curve on employer-sponsored plans by 10 to 20%. And it's really phenomenal. We have built a system where we're basically referred by insurance brokers. And so that's how you got our information, was through the EPC. And the EPC basically has seen our work with other districts. And so all of our work is voluntary. It's covered under, we signed business associates agreement and safeguard PHI. But basically through our one-on-one connection, we can learn the stories of families voluntarily, people who are interested in having help. And we basically help them to get access to resources that they didn't know they were eligible for. And so an example, so my daughter passed away from CF when she was just 7, but I have other kids who also have that. And I share that with you because I want you to understand kind of the why we do this work. And I think it's one of the ways that we're able to build trust quickly is when you meet families who have also are dealing with hard things. And I'm sure if we went around the room, we would find, people in the room with people you care about that are going through hard things. But the way healthcare is set up, maybe just 2% of the nation has claims that's more than $50,000. 70% of the nation spends less than $1,000 in healthcare. So why then does healthcare cost so much? And it's because of really complicated families like mine that are driving these costs. And so you can't fix them all, but there are basically hidden resources, funding sources that are already existed. And I'll give you an example of it. Let's say we have a single parent with a child that has complex challenges, and the parent is eligible for the plan here. They work here at the school. It would be no surprise that a parent who works here, an employee, would think about their total compensation and enroll on the school's plan. That's what most everybody would do if you were eligible for the school's plan. That would be one of the reasons that would have attracted you to work at the school, is not just your wage, but also the benefits, right? That's an important aspect of the comp. And so families would likely just kind of hit the easy button and do an enrollment. That's what we find is the default. But if we slow down and start to understand what's really going on with individuals, we might identify that mother and child, the child might be eligible for a different plan through the ACA. And in Ohio, we have the Affordable Care Act that has expanded coverage available. So there's access to plans that people don't fully understand, and people that are eligible and working full-time that have good incomes are still eligible for this help, but many times people are unaware. And whether it's something like the ACA, imagine if you have a mother and child who's picking up the cost of the insurance. The way that the benefit works is the school's plan pays a big portion of it, but the member still has some skin and pays a portion, right? But if the member only needed to take employee-only coverage instead of employee-child, it saves the member money. Does that make sense? At the same time, the district saves money because the district, instead of buying coverage for family from the EPC, they're buying a smaller amount. And so what's been happening with other districts that are using it, they're seeing a change in their invoice to the EPC that's very significant. And we think that this would fit the district here. And so we've done some preliminary looking at the plan and just a complimentary step. And we think that this would fit you all. And so basically, the next steps, if the district was interested in exploring this further, the work is voluntary on the part of members. And so it's really critical to build trust. It does not work if people, one, aren't interested in finding ways to make healthcare work better. So that's critical. So what has worked well with other districts is to, and apologize if this isn't exactly how it works here, but we would suggest the best practice is get interested people that have an opinion around the way the healthcare should work, like an insurance committee. Let us come and present how other school districts are setting this up in a way with interested parties at the insurance committee. So we would suggest that that would be reps from OPSI and the teachers union and administration. We can share how other districts are managing healthcare in a way that is good for the employees and the members. But the byproduct is when you identify some of the complicated situations that can be improved, it makes the cost of healthcare work better for everyone. Even for the people who don't use healthcare much, those people are wondering, why does the health insurance keep going up year after year? So 70% of the employees are barely using it, but they're still stuck kind of in this loop. And I was just doing some easy, quick math, and it probably wouldn't surprise you, employers in the area sometimes get rate increases on medical plans. It's not unusual for it to be 10% per year. But we've seen examples where an employer might get a 20 or 30% rate increase. Now with the EPC, you have some protection from something extreme like that. But our benchmarks are showing that this is changing the risk score within the plan anywhere from 10 to 20% net of admin fees. So we do get paid education fee to do the work, but we also have a performance guarantee. And what's been interesting for the other districts is the savings from the program more than supports the way that the program works. And so that's a little bit about it. And I wanted to see if the board has any questions for me.
How many schools are you involved with?
About 24 districts right now are using it. We started off with a couple of consortiums. And so basically with the consortium, it was a smaller consortium of like 10 schools. And the consortium was actually self-funded, and the districts are around that. It made a lot of sense. The broker advisor who was helping the consortium to organize it recognized that this could work and brought us into the consortium. And then individual districts of the consortium started to work at it at different levels. And so there are some hurdles that keep people from accessing different types of plans. We heard even some comments a little earlier where discussion was brought up around surcharges or exclusions. And sometimes employers need to try to manage healthcare, and it's not uncommon to think that somehow a stick can get behavior. We have found that we're able to get this change by inviting people to set it up in a way that's more effective for a family. And we can teach the district how to start to set up tools. One thing is called an integrated HRA. We don't need to spend too much time on it, but there's a way for the school to collaborate with another employer and allow other employers to help offset the costs, so not the burden of the healthcare is just on the members in the school here.
What's the mechanics of the integration into the district? I mean, you mentioned dealing with OPC and some of the other unions. Do you come in, present, meet with teachers? How does that work?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And our team, we have about 30 of us, and so I'm the president of the company. But you got some people that care deeply about EPC and wanted to make sure that we could give you an introduction, so I was happy to come. But basically, if you had the program up and running, you would have an account manager from our team and a couple team members that would basically work on the campus and have regular relationships with leadership and with the employees and members that are eligible in ways that members want to learn. Sometimes you might have somebody that says, hey, you know, my situation's private. I really don't want to meet with someone at the school. We'll meet with them in a place that makes sense for them. And so the education fee is covered by the district, but the savings from the program basically impacts, you see it in two ways. The bill that you are spending with the EPC starts to drop because you have lower head count, but then also the claims risk score starts to get better over time because complicated situations start to receive answers. And so example would be helping a family like mine to identify ways that they can access healthcare in a way that fits the family better.
Do you offer any other health products as part of your services?
No, so there's no insurance products that our team sells, or no commissions or things like that we're offering. What we do, so a family that, let's say for example, we were to talk with a person who's, just as an example, had a disabled member in their family, and the disabled member was eligible for a Medicare Advantage plan, but they didn't understand how it worked. We would do the one-on-one education, help them to learn and identify how that could work, and the family could decide what insurance carrier they felt like made sense for them. Maybe they already have a contact in the community they want to work with. If they don't have anybody, our team can make a referral. But probably about 98% of EMS's revenue is just a subscription-based education fee from employers. And you might be familiar with like education save, or I would say like a utility savings program, where if you can identify a way for an employer to save money, a consultant might charge a percentage. Ours is a little different than that. Just with my own child passing away, we were really sensitive to how the pricing should work. So we just do a flat education fee. It's not a percentage of savings. The savings, majority of the savings stays with the employer. But we do offer a performance guarantee. We don't have any accounts at all that where the program has not paid for itself and the client is reducing their risk score and helping to have more effective renewals in the future. One thing that I think it's important to just set good expectations. I don't think it's going to turn the clock back on healthcare, right? But I think what is realistic to think about is what happens with all the financial pressures the district's already facing. What happens with the next increase that comes on the health insurance? And so if there are things that you could do internally to lower your risk score and prepare, does that make sense to do? And in fact, that's exactly how I would offer to a family that says, well, what's in it for me? Why should I make a change? We would say, if there's a way for you to access healthcare that's good for your family, and it also is a good stewardship move for the district, why wouldn't we explore it? Let's make sure that you have all the information you need so that you can make a good decision for your family. And you'd think, doesn't employers already do that? But oftentimes today, the way the healthcare education works is we have a software program through the EPC, and you go to the website and you get your information and you have to decide your enrollment. So it's hard sometimes for families to understand that there are programs out there that would help them.
How much, as far as the education fee, is that different, different prices for different size districts? And are you locked in for a 2-year contract?
Great question. There's no lock-in. We give you pricing so that you guys can budget well. And for a group your size, you would hit our minimum, which is $60,000 a year. So we bill monthly. That seems like a really significant investment, but the return on the investment is probably anywhere from $250,000 to $500,000 a year in savings. Now, it takes time for the savings to build up. So what we offer is a performance guarantee. We basically create reporting so that you can see the education fee that you've put in compared to the savings. And if you get to a point, since it's all based on voluntary participation, if we ever have a client where the participation is not catching up enough to cover the cost, we put our fee on hold. So that's the way our performance guarantee works. That's why we don't have any clients that have, never had a problem, is that we can put our thumb on the scale by saying, we're going to work longer at no fee until the participation catches up. Because we recognize there's not new money to throw at this. If there's a way to make healthcare work better, you have to do it with the budget you have. And so the program has to be sustainable from the savings. And the benchmarks are clients are seeing about 10 to 20% net savings of the fee. If that's making sense.
Just one final question. How long, on average, is that return? So implementation, I would assume it takes time and actually it would probably grow, momentum.
Yeah.
Where is that threshold where you see, because you have all the data, where that time is to reach pretty much max savings benefit?
Yeah, great question. And the question is how quickly does it ramp up and how do you get to a really efficient return on the investment? Probably about 24 months in, you get to a really good peak return on the investment. But the initial data shows us that there's probably maybe as many as 30 or 40 employees that we suspect have opportunities to do this differently, but the families aren't aware. And there's hurdles that keep the families from understanding it or for it making sense. And so we also help districts to understand what the hurdles are by working with families and then identifying tools that you can adopt that become available through the Section 125 plan. An example might be a spousal HRA. So it's a kinder way of allowing other employers to help pick up the cost. And typically, you can have something like a memorandum of understanding and not have to go into full negotiations, because these are member-friendly ways of managing the plan. And so it's something that families want to receive the help on. And it's so it keeps with kind of the culture of the way the benefits are set up.
The staff can choose to.
Say that again?
The staff can choose to not participate if they don't want to, maintain their current
Everybody could.
plan.
Everybody would maintain that choice. Another way of thinking about it is right now, you could take the plan or you could waive. And you have about a little less than 20% of the eligible population is already waived. So we did an analysis, and of the people that have already waived, if they were to enroll the next year, they're still eligible, right? It would cost the district another $600,000 if the 20% of the people who are currently waived randomly decided to enroll. What would get someone who's currently waived to enroll? You should ask yourself, well, where are they accessing coverage? Maybe with another employer, right? What if the other employer does something to push them to this plan? So there's risk to not figure this out. And you have built-in savings of 20% of the population that's already waiving, but we think there's a lot of other people that would benefit. And so instead of just giving people two choices, either enroll or waive, we would help to design a third choice, which is maybe partially stay, like mom stay, but child access it this way, or potentially one person stay, but the parent enroll where they work, and the district could have something like a health reimbursement arrangement that makes it financially feasible for the family. So there's a lot of details there, and probably more than what we need to do in this meeting, but these are some of the reasons that we would invite you to do the study with a group of people that could really get into the details and find the best practices. But those are great questions.
Are you also able to provide us, like the 24 schools that you have worked with, so for a reference? So we could.
Yep, there's local, and
You can give me that. You can
Yeah.
give me that list and we'll go through them.
there are.
Because it would be nice to follow up with them and see how your team does coming into the school and.
They've done a little bit of that even prior to the meeting. And the EPC is not going to send us over if they weren't comfortable. We're already doing this with districts that are inside the EPC. So these are other schools that your claims are being shared with. And so you'd be able to contact, the equivalent of your administrations there and talk, and those are good questions. Also, you also asked if the contract, it's very flexible, and if you need a 60-day out, you can have one. We don't need the contract the thing creates enough value that we can make the work agreement very simple.
Does the contract price increase, like the second and third year?
We have not needed to do that. And so we would probably be willing to do like a 2-year program. Who knows, right? Like what the future has. I'm a positive person, so I like to think we're going to come out of this as a country and good things to come. But we would be able to extend like a 24-month program where you knew what your responsibilities were, and you would still have that performance guarantee. But the key next is to get feedback from other people, because it needs to be something that everybody wants to work on, because it is voluntary, and so you can't require people to do it. It's something that has to be compelling enough, and we can design it in a way that's very compelling, and where the invitation is so strong. We basically ask the family, if there's a way to make healthcare save more or work better, are you interested in learning about that? And that's the invitation that the families hear. And if we asked any of us, why would that not be the answer? Yeah. None of us probably love the way healthcare works today. We'd probably all like to see it work a little bit better. I know that would be my answer for my own policy. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We're gonna let Ralph walk right out the door if you want. All right. All right, so just we're at that time of year again as far as the school calendar is concerned for the next school year, 25-26. The Teachers Association and I have been working on some different drafts that we could give to our employees to see, which version of next year's calendar works best for everyone. As you recall, our teachers are contracted for 183 days. That is actually 181 work days on the calendar. So we've been right around 173 instructional days for students in the past couple years. It has been, prior to that, it's been 175, but with the 2 elections that take place in our facility, it's just not a good idea, I think, to have students in session on those days. So we've got 4 different versions. There is very little variance in each version. And just bringing this to the board's attention because once this goes out to the employees, the teaching staff, then it will come back before the board, whether it's the organizational meeting or the regular meeting in January. So I just want this to be on the board's radar, that this is on the way. This is a usual practice every year, just making sure that the board is aware. And by typical, I mean we're starting after the fair. It's usually we start in the middle of the week, first day with students. There's a couple of days for in-servicing, professional development, meetings, prep in teacher classrooms the first 2 days. There's a pretty extensive break at Christmas time. That seems to be something that families and students and staff members all appreciate, is the extra time around the holidays. We always have graduation and have historically had graduation commencement, the commencement ceremony on the Friday of Memorial Day weekend. So I mean, they're the same pillars of previous years that have existed in the calendar will continue in 25-26. Okay, so just that one organizational thing. Mrs. Hartley has a couple of comments about the fall 3rd grade ELA results. I can send them in.
Pass those down.
Yep.
So every October, towards the middle or end of October, all 3rd graders in the state of Ohio have their first attempt at the 3rd grade language arts reading test. And this is the only grade level where that test is given twice during the year. Everywhere else it's just given in the spring. However, with the 3rd grade reading guarantee, the state wanted to provide students with 2 different opportunities for them to demonstrate that they are on level in their reading ability. And so we just, the week before last, received our scores from the 2024 fall test. And so what you have here in front of you are the percentage of students who already in October measured against 3rd grade reading standards are already proficient. So you're not measuring them against 2nd grade standards, even though they're only 2 months after they've finished 2nd grade. They're measuring against a 3rd grade proficient expectation. And you can see that this year in 2024, 44% of our students were already at proficient or higher, which is, if you look, exactly the same percentage that we had this time last year. So in 2023, we also had 44% of our students already proficient. However, 2 things that I think are important to point out and celebrate are that even though that percent has not increased from 23 to 24, if you look back to 2022, and that was pretty typical for a while, in 2022 we only had about 29% of our students who were proficient or higher. And so the last 2 years we have performed much better in the fall of the 3rd grade. The other additional highlight to point out here is that our comparison to the rest of the 3rd grade students across the state of Ohio has actually increased. So a year ago at this time, yes, we had 44% of our students who were proficient. The 125,000 to 130,000 students across the state of Ohio, 48% of them were proficient. So last year at this time, we were 4% behind the average across the state. However, this year, the average in Ohio is only 42%. And again, we maintained that 44, so we're now 2% above the state average. So over the last 3 years, we have increased from 11% below the state to 4% below the state to 2% above the state. So this is definitely a trend in the right direction in terms of our 3rd graders' reading ability in the fall. So we're pretty happy with these. As always, the work is not done. There's always improvements and growth to be made, but we feel like these are trending in the right direction, and we're pretty happy with the results of some of the changes that we've been making in terms of literacy instruction.
So just to clarify.
Yeah.
This is taken when they first get back to school, right?
It is
Pretty
taken
much.
late October, so they have 2 months of instruction in third grade.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's evaluating a third grade reading
It is,
level,
yes, what
right?
you would expect at the end of the year for a
So
third
then we can
grader.
measure progress at the end of the year.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
What's the big leap? How can you account for the big jump from 22 to 23?
There were several things I think that happened, that it's hard to like maybe put a thumb on one specific thing. In 2023, that was the first year that we had implemented UFly Foundations, which was a phonics curriculum. However, that was only 2 months into the year, so we're pretty sure it wasn't necessarily that. However, we had the students who would have been third graders in 2023, their teachers would have been experiencing a lot of professional development around literacy while those kids were in kindergarten, in first grade, and in second grade. So the vast majority of our elementary teachers went through a very rigorous training called Letters, which took tens of hours for them to complete that, and they learned a lot. They also received Orton Gillingham training, which is a research and evidence-based body of evidence on teaching early literacy skills, including phonics and decoding and encoding. So we're attributing it to a lot of learning on the part of our teachers about all of the science and brain research about how students learn to read, and then beginning to implement some of those instructional practices in the early grades.
Those wonders too.
Wonders, we had implemented Wonders language arts curriculum in 2022. So there was 2 new language arts curriculums across 2 or 3 years. Yeah.
Okay.
Other questions?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Ready when you are, yes.
Okay. All right, for treasurer's report. A, approval of Board of Education minutes. Recommend approval of the Board of Education minutes for November 18th, 2024, regular meeting.
So moved. Second. Roll call, Mrs. Brumbaugh,
Yes.
Mrs. Gibb Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Kress,
Yes.
Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes. All right, B, recommend approval of Board of Education minutes, December 9th, 2024, special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Roll call, Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh,
Yes.
Mrs. Gibb Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Kress,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes. C, approval of November financial report, recommend approval of November financial report. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
I'm sorry, is that Lori or?
Yes. Lori.
Discussion. Vote first, I forgot.
Usually afterwards.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I got hung up on something else I was reading. Okay, so the November financial report, overall, the district is remaining in budget based off of the May financial forecast. The reason we haven't flipped over to the November forecast yet is because that was approved mid-November. So for the January meeting where we report on the December financials, it'll be flipped over to what you guys have approved. So just going through real quick, the general fund balance, we were budgeting for it to be 5.651. It came in slightly under budget of 5.647 with about a $4,000 budget variance, which is that's not too bad compared to the big budget that we're on. So you can see that revenues came in at $6,937,000, which is about $50,000 lower than budgeted, and we'll go through some of the variances there. And the offset of that, the expenditures were a little bit lower than what we had budgeted. So moving on, one thing worth noted, when I was going through some of my, working up my notes for today's meeting, for whatever reason, this next page, I had included the October 31st month ends. I'm not sure how that got in there, so I went ahead and fixed it. If anybody needs additional copies, just let me know. But what is up there now is the November 30th, so I apologize for that. Flipping over to the notes relating, I'm going to leave this up there. The lines, the property taxes and the income tax, there were no changes, there were no additional collections or anything, so those variances remain the same. The unrestricted grant money that we get from the state is starting to level out based off of some of the projections that we are seeing. The percentage was a little bit more closer to what we needed it to be. All other operating revenue is down almost $27,000. That's mainly attributed to the interest receipts that we're used to seeing. And with the market, I've preached about it before, and Justin alluded to it earlier with the market changes. We're kind of anticipating this change. The trends will be continued to be analyzed. The actual revenues for November 30th of 2024 were less than 1% lower than budgeted on the May 2024 forecast. Moving down under expenditures, personnel services, which are teacher and staff salaries, it is starting to level out from the reductions that were made for this year. One small note, there was a reduction in some of our federal funding that we received, so I had forgot to mention that in the last month when we realized that. It's not material, but it's just worth noting. The retirement and insurance benefits, like I mentioned in the last meeting, the open enrollment was finished. We didn't see any significant changes there. Actually had a couple washes, some coming on, some coming off. You will start to see those payments being made in December for January's coverages. Also, we've talked about it before, the purchase services, it is over budget, but we had to keep up with the needs of some of the kiddos. And I didn't put a note on here, but the supplies and materials are still running under budget, so those two kind of offset each other. The expenditures overall were about 0.6% lower than projected. And then, as I stated, we were only about $4,000 out of sync with what we had budgeted in the forecast for the cash balance. So the ending cash balance in the general fund was $5,647,000. Went through those notes. This is the cash summary report for each one of the funds that we had used, that we use within the district. I've mentioned it before, some of these negative amounts down here at the bottoms. What we have to do is we spend that money, so our books go into the negative, and then we request what's called a PCR, or a project cash request. We have to prove to the states through our reports that what we spent the money on, and then they reimburse us the next month. So that's why these numbers over here are sitting in the negative. I think we've actually received the money already here in December. The investment summary report, the last couple of accounts down here at the bottom, you're going to see higher than usual account balances. That is in anticipation of paying the December 1st bond payments that are due. So these are these amounts right here. Not much change in the CDs and government bonds that we have in place. In fact, I don't think anything matured. So you can see the line for the yield rate for blue is Star Ohio account, and then the green is for all of our CDs and government bonds that we have up here. The same thing happened last year with the cafeteria. There was a slight dip, about $15,000 from the previous month. Again, happened last year and it happened the year before. It's just the cycle of purchasing and receiving funds for kiddos and their lunches. And then last but not least, the disbursement summary report for all checks that were cut in November. Questions? Okay, now we're going to do the roll call. Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Broombaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
5-0.
All right. D, levy discussion. Did you want to talk about it now?
So I know we had last discussed, in the last meeting, we were going to place the school district income tax on the spring ballot, and I know you guys didn't get a chance to work through the percentages if we were going to continue on with that. We had to have 2 resolutions in order to get those approved. So the resolution of necessity, which is what you see further on down in the agenda, and then at a meeting in January, we would do the resolution to proceed.
If we didn't take any action tonight, with the 2 meetings in January, would that be sufficient?
Yeah, yes, we will stay on target with the deadlines required by the Board of Elections. I did not bring the dates with me, but yes, if we stay, if we decide to have more discussion on it, absolutely, we will pass the first resolution in the organizational meeting, and then we can go ahead and pass the second one in our regular meeting in January.
Yeah, I had asked to table it for tonight because I'm still running through some numbers and getting clarification from attorneys.
Mhm.
With the debt linked to the income tax. Basically, I think I stated this last week, brick walls. And then you figure out if you can work around it, so. I wanted a little more time just to either just gain the knowledge, even if we can't proceed, but we would know, so.
I think for purposes of thoroughness, I think we table it tonight, and I agree with Justin, and make sure, all options are considered before we make a go at it again.
I think if everybody doesn't feel confident in a decision today, there's no harm in waiting. We just have to know by February, whatever, or two.
January.
Or,
Right.
the ultimate
First two in
deadline is
January.
the beginning of February, but we have to have 2 meetings, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
We got,
So we have time to get the answers.
Yeah.
so we have the organizational and then the regular meeting.
If a solution was found to the tying of the bonds to the income tax, I would be for exploring it, but I don't know.
Yeah, Justin and I have had a lot of conversations.
It's pretty frustrated with this.
So you guys are all right with not making, we have to vote on that later then.
Yeah, we'll vote on
that. Okay. 5, other special reports, MUEA. Anything? Okay. 6, additions and deletions to the, or agenda confirmation A, additions and deletions.
There are none.
B, approval of the agenda, recommend approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Parsons?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes. 7, old business, none, I think. 8, new business. A, appropriations amendment, recommend approval of increases and decreases in total appropriations for fiscal year 2025 as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Van Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Alright. B, recommend approval of the following resolution of necessity, consider a school district income tax.
A motion to table the vote on this resolution.
Second it.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh,
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes. C, Public Library Term Approval. Recommend the following appointment to the Milton-Union Public Library Board of Trustees. Valerie McKay and is January 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 31. Sarah Lay, December 17th, 2024 to December 31st, 2026. Accept the following resignation effective 12/17/24. Marvin Rue.
So moved.
Second.
Mrs. Brumbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Kress,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
D, Meta contract, recommend approval to renew the contracts with Meta Solutions for internet access from 7/1/2025 to 6/30/2028 for a total of $79,560 or $26,520 per year. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Just to clarify, this is solely internet. I've heard rumors that it's Facebook. All right.
It's also worth noting that there's no change from the previous years in that we do have an E-rate that helps offset some of this. Just want to put that up there.
I think that's the first time we've never had a price increase.
Thanks, pardon.
Meta Solutions,
Yes.
an Ohio ODE organization, we use with Meta, that's Facebook.
Well, that's why you said that then.
Like services for schools.
I've heard it.
MetaSolutions.net.
Roll call. Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Kress,
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
E, consent calendar, recommend approval of all matters listed under the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Diaz,
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons,
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh,
Yes.
Mr. Kress,
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman.
Yes.
Motion passed 5-0.
9, other authorizations, resolutions. A, appoints President Pro Tem for the organizational meeting. Anyone want to be one meeting president?
I'd be willing to do it if
Okay,
they need be.
sounds good to me. Okay. 10, board reports.
He just starts the meeting. Organizational meeting.
Oh, what date is it?
Organizational meeting, 12.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
My beer died.
Organizational
Do they
meeting.
provide chargers?
Yes. We can get you one.
Legislative and student achievement. I had nothing to report. Policy update.
We're meeting with, when are we meeting with Norm from,
Week from today.
get,
I think it's pretty extensive, what that Neola has planned. And then there's, I think, some things that the board wanted us to talk about too.
okay.
December 23rd.
23rd?
That's
Yeah.
a week.
I may not be here.
I asked him if he wanted to meet the day after Christmas, so.
I'm not sure what my flights are, so. All right.
I could potentially go. I
You
could go.
can.
Yeah,
I can.
When are you meeting?
I'll give you time. It's the afternoon. I think it's 1 o'clock.
And Brad Hill, or you will also send out the changes with the policy.
Yes,
Correct.
we'll go through the policy updates, and then you folks will be able to see the strike through and the new language.
CTC Building and Transportation.
I missed the Weibel meeting. Maybe Curtis can give us a little update on the good news that Weibel provided us.
Get it out here. So, we did meet with them last week. We are currently operating at 53 cents a square foot, which puts us in the top 5 percentile in the state. We continue there. Our baseline is 48 cents a square foot, but due to rising costs, that's obviously increased a little bit. But we continue to operate at a very efficient, environmentally friendly level. They tell us we're one of the top 5 in the state in energy efficiency. So,
Yeah, we're at the top of the heap of the districts that they're working with.
mhm.
So there's tons of folks out there that aren't practicing the same, efficiency practices that we are. So I mean, arguably they work with the most energy efficient districts in the state, or some of the most, and we're at the top of the heap. So.
And the baseline is for the median for most districts is about $1.06 a square foot. So we're about half of that, just with certain measures we have in place here to scheduling and how we obtain our resources and so on and so forth.
So there's a lot of things that Weibel does behind the scenes to program the
Yes.
school to ensure that we are operating as efficiently as possible.
They monitor 24/7. So they let us know, we get, when things happen, we get alerts, but they also get them just in case, it's outside of business hours. So,
On the transportation side, this is actually Curtis and I worked on it probably a month ago. I've been working with Curtis to put together more detail on our bus fleet, van fleet, detailed out in a spreadsheet. So when it comes time for if we order a new bus this fiscal year, we know exactly what we're trading in and maybe multiple units in. Also with that, tie it to a maintenance record.
yes.
Even though a bus might be newer, it doesn't mean they're not breaking down a lot. So increase the quality of our fleet and decrease the numbers some. That's the only other thing I have on transportation.
Mhm.
We're still trying to hire new bus drivers.
Yes, we are. We had a few that have slowed down, but we did get a couple more applicants actually this week that seem very eager. So,
So 2?
yes, that
That's
is
good.
correct, too. It was actually, I received the applications the same day.
Is there a speed track?
I wish. Honestly, the hard part is getting them into the pre-service training. There's quite a wait list for that. I wonder why. I say that sarcastically, as everybody's looking for bus drivers. So they actually limit you to 2 seats per class. And typically, you get signed up, the class you're in is the following month, sometimes it's even the month after, just based on, timing of when it is and availability.
Is that for the CDL or that's a specific training?
That is specific, that is the 15-hour pre-service class.
Okay, so even if you had like a CDL, you
Correct.
still do it?
You still have to do it. It's also something that drivers have to renew. So it's a renewal even if you have your endorsements. So,
Well, it's good to hear.
yep. We have one that is actually, she's doing her 30 hours of training with one of our onboard instructors. So,
Okay. Anything else? Maybe CTC?
Nothing for me.
Milton-Union Education Foundation.
We're not meeting this month, but just two important dates, the Bulldog Bash on March 15th, and then June 6th for the Bulldog Golf Classic.
Okay. F, Audit and Finance Committee.
Just that the audit is nearing completion. I have not been alerted to any major issues, so.
When do you think you'll get a report?
I'm sorry, say that again?
When do you think you'll get a report? I
Um,
can't remember how long it normally takes. after.
she's trying, there's one more, piece of their chapters that they're getting ready to audit, and so she's trying to get, a staff audit who recently has come off of maybe another school district or entity. So she's trying to get a little bit of help with that, so.
G, Facility Complex.
I have nothing unless Curtis does.
11, do you have any general information?
No.
Okay. 12, board announcements. A, upcoming meetings. The organizational meeting is Monday, January 6th, 2025 at 6 p.m. in Board Conference Room. The next regular board meeting, date to be determined, do we not have that figured
Yeah,
out?
you'll look at the list.
Oh, okay. And that'll be at 6 p.m.
Likely in the media center.
And 13, executive session. Recommend approval to adjourn to executive session for purposes authorized under Board of Education Policy 0166 and ORC 121.22G1 to consider appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee in ORC 121.22G5 to consider confidential matters required by federal law, regulations, or state statutes. There will be no action taken after the board exits executive session. Invitees are Dr. Ritchie, Carrie,
Curtis.
Curtis.
Katie. Katie?
Okay.
Make a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
Mr. Diaz?
Yes.
Mrs. Kim Parsons?
Yes.
Mr. Kress?
Yes.
Mrs. Brumbaugh?
Yes.
Dr. Hinkleman?
Yes.